Since the dawn of time, man has proposed a simple question. What if we take recognizable things and do nothing but reference them in an attempt for people to point and laugh at the silver screen? With that in mind, the parody movie was born. We all know this story. It's gone through many changes. I personally believe it peaked in its heyday with movies like Airplane, The Naked Gun, and many of Mel Brooks' early movies like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. But sometime around the 90s, the idea appeared where people thought, what if we substitute plot, leave those on the back burner, and just stuff a movie with a bunch of recognizable images, which is what brought us the infamous Shriek. What do you mean you don't remember Shriek, along with its full official title, by the way? Shriek, If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th. This parody movie spoofs a bunch of horror movies, but mainly the plot of Scream. If this concept sounds familiar to you, it's because this movie was released just a few months before a little indie movie by the name of
Scary Movie.
Scary Movie has landed itself in this weird limbo state among parody movies, as it's certainly split a lot of people on their feelings about it. Some people like it, hailing it as a classic of the early 2000s comedy, while others hate it and think it is one of the many deaths of cinema. However, with my fresh eyes, as I've only watched the original movie back in March, and honestly, it's not completely terrible. There's a couple of jokes that are super unfunny, especially when it comes to the abundance of piss and shit humor. But aside from that, there's a lot of pretty good attention to detail in terms of its visual gags, especially with a lot of stuff going on in the background. At times, it reminded me of the way The Naked Gun handles its visual humor, just maybe not in the exact same level, so to speak. I'd be wrong in saying, however, this franchise certainly wasn't a catalyst for a strange domino effect in the direction of parody movies, as it doesn't help the fact that by the time Scary Movie franchise got to the third movie, it had been taken over by different filmmakers helming the franchise, and by the time these movies were coming out, its peers brought us some of the most woeful pieces of cinema I have ever laid my eyes on. I'm talking date movie, I'm talking epic movie, and of course I'm talking about disaster movie. A film I wish I could unsee for how garbage it is. I think that's the issue with Scary Movie for a lot of people. They write it off, the original film, as being exactly like epic movie or disaster movie. But again, in hindsight, that original film is still pretty fun. But that being said, many years later today, we are finally graced with the newest installment in the Scary Movie franchise. This movie is directed by Michael Tiddes. It stars Anna Faris, Regina Hall, Marlon Wayans, Shawn Wayans, and many others. I really don't know what to expect going into this, especially when that first trailer got released and they decided to open it with such a stinker of an opening joke.
My God, he stabbed her! Not her! My pronouns are they, them.
It just rubbed me the wrong way, especially with how it's handled in its marketing, that this was going to be the movie to really offend Gen Z, and they're not pulling any punches with this one. It just read as a little desperate, but I bit my tongue and decided to go see it. So with all that being said, what did I think about it? It feels weird talking about performances in a movie like this, since with this being a parody movie, there's many moments where actors will be switching to different characters as the movie progresses, so I suppose I'll just do my best to express how each actor more so made me feel in their roles from seeing them here. Marlon Wayans reprises his role as Shorty here. He's known for his roles in movies like Requiem for a Dream and White Chicks. I thought he did good in the role. This is a character he's so naturally good at playing, and it was interesting to see the character's progression in this movie, essentially not changing in the slightest from whenever we would have seen him last. He provides quite a few laughs from me from the way his character acts. It was just pretty endearing, and it feels natural for the guy to be back in this role again. Almost a little too natural to a certain extent. It is interesting seeing however old Marlon Wayans is now, that he can just go back into this sort of role that he was playing almost 20 years ago. I don't know if it's sad is the right word, but it's certainly interesting. Shawn Wayans reprises his role as Ray in this movie. He's known for his roles in movies like White Chicks and Don't Be a Menace. Wayans did a good job in his role again and provides some chuckles out of me from the way he carries himself. The big thing with Ray's character, if you're familiar with the franchise, obviously, is that he's very obviously gay, despite always claiming not to be. There's one gag especially where he desperately tries to convince people that he's not, and this is where some of the comedy chops come in to show, even if I think this scene drags on a little bit, which I'll get into later. Anna Faris reprises her role as Cindy in this. She's known for her roles in movies like Lost in Translation and Smiley Face. She does good in her role, as a lot of the quirks of her character is shown here. She's definitely more tame and less zany than how she acted throughout the franchise, due to her character being older, as she's meant to emulate the likes of Laurie Strode. from the Halloween franchise in the later David Gordon Green entries. There's a couple of moments where she was able to provide some chuckles out of me too. Regina Hall reprises her role from the franchise in this movie too. She's known for her roles in movies like One Battle After Another and Superhero Movie. Straight up, it's certainly a contrast seeing her role here in comparison to One Battle After Another, but I suppose that's a testament to the range for Hall. Her character is essentially the same as she has always been in the previous installments. She's pretty much the loudest in terms of how she handles her comedic elements, which worked for the scenes that she was present in, which kept me entertained. Dave Sheridan reprises his role as Doofy in this. He's known for his roles in movies like Ghost World and The Devil's Rejects. The guy does a good job in the role at acting stupid to the point of it being endearing, and surprisingly doesn't go far enough into being offensive, which again for a movie like this is pretty surprising to see. His character isn't in the movie all that much, but it's definitely fun to see how they portray him in the modern day. I thought the actors portraying some of the new generation of characters were pretty fun to see here. For example, I thought Cameron Scott Roberts did a good job at portraying the love interest for the Scream segments, as he did a good job at acting strikingly a lot like Jack Quaid in Scream 5, especially from his mannerisms and vocal inflections too. Olivia Rose Keegan did a good job at portraying Cindy's daughter. Not only did the actress look a good deal like Anna Faris in certain scenes, but she really hams up her acting in a lot of moments, which really adds to the campy aspect of the whole movie. One would argue that at points they could be bad acting, but I think it's just this specific style of overacting that was needed for a movie like this. Next I want to talk about the plot of this movie, which is what I would do for a regular movie, but naturally this isn't a normal movie. And I'm sorry to say, but there really isn't a plot to be found here, as this thing just stuffed to the brim with references. It's mainly following the plot of Scream 5 to the extent of recreating scenes with the exact lines from that movie especially. The opening scene specifically, however, is referencing Scream 6, which I thought was a fun homage. I feel like if I want to talk about certain gags that may not have worked or didn't work for me, I'd have to get into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, I would suggest firstly liking the video, saving it to your watch later playlist, and while you're at it, hey, maybe even consider subscribing, as who knows, by the time you've finished watching Scary Movie, I may have another video waiting for you already. You don't know that? Okay, good. I thought in the opening it was pretty fun to see Tiana Taylor as the cold-open woman. I thought it was endearing that she was able to make fun of herself for not winning the Oscar for One Battle After Another. As the movie progresses, the references to other movies become more frequent. I'd be here all day naming all the references that are thrown into this. One of the ones near the beginning is a Sinners parody that features Ray. This is the scene that I mentioned goes on a little bit too long, but there is some part of what Wayans achieves here that I found slightly entertaining. It should be said that the pronoun joke that's in the trailer is kind of worse as the bit is extended, and it is quite possibly the most unfunniest part of the whole movie. But I find it funny how contradictory this scene is, as the movie also features a trans character to my shock isn't subjected to a bunch of transphobic jokes, which I'm assuming is due to Marlon Wayans having a trans kid himself, and if there is any jokes, they are literally just light jabs, which I'm sure was approved by the kid themselves. This is something that bothers me about the movie. Not that the movie doesn't feature transphobia, obviously, but it's the fact that the marketing of this thing prided itself on being super offensive and that Gen Z isn't gonna like the movie, which is weirder when you consider Gen Z basically grew up with these movies just as much as millennials would have. This movie is pretty tame in comparison to the original, but one thing I didn't appreciate was a bunch of extremely distasteful jokes that should have been left on the cutting room floor. These jokes include references to Diddy and the Epstein files. These jokes just made me feel extremely uncomfortable with the knowledge that these subjects have real life victims that are still affected by these things, and I think it's wrong to have jokes like this in the movie. It's also just further solidifying the whole conspiracy theory. Well, some people may consider it a conspiracy, that there is this constant push, specifically with the whole Epstein thing, that there is just an abundance of memes to make people desensitized to the topic about it, and I kind of feel like having a joke like that in this movie is further pushing that idea along, but hey, what do I know? Along with that, this movie has aged itself severely already, as there's references to stuff like COVID and a 6-7 jokes of all things. It's stuff like this that had me either stone-faced or just rolling my eyes at the screen for how lazy and furthermore how desperate this movie felt to be keeping up with the times, instead of writing thought-out jokes that could feel timeless. Like, the original Scary Movie is obviously a product of its time, but at the same time, you can watch that movie now and still get the humor of it. Like, who will watch this movie in 20 years and understand what fucking 6-7 means? Another quick thing I wanted to mention was this extended animated sequence spoofing K-pop Demon Hunters that for my taste went on a little bit too long. It just wasn't all that funny to me. I get what it's doing, but it was just odd, honestly. Along with that, the inclusion of Kai Cenat also felt like it was easily gonna date the film poorly for years to come. I'm sure the guy is relevant now, but I can't imagine the next generation watching this in 20 years knowing who he is. I enjoyed the third act of this movie as it is designed around the fact for stating its case as to why this movie needed to exist. Like I said, going into spoilers here, so again, you've been warned, I like the idea of this movie being made in retaliation of the latter entries in the franchise being taken over by non-black filmmakers and being creatively controlled, unfortunately, by the Weinsteins. While yes, they were producers on the first two, it felt like creative decisions fell onto them for the third, fourth, and fifth movies especially. The idea of the Wayans taking this franchise back for themselves is honestly pretty satisfying to think about, plus the cameos that spawn from this sequence are honestly pretty delightful and provide some pretty good laughs too. If you're a regular on this channel, you may see that this review is a little scattered. Well, that would be fitting for a movie that's how it felt just watching it. The movie barely has a plot, and each scene never fully feels like it naturally blends into the other. It's just opportunities for these characters to be in recent horror movies or to name the movies they're referencing, which to me got a little tiring. I definitely don't think this is anything too amazing, but it's not cinematic poison either. To an extent, the audience I had seen this with seemed to have a good time, but the atmosphere of the room seems to be agreed on that there are fun moments here and there, but not every single joke is a hit. Although for my taste, I found myself not laughing much more frequently than other people, as there's a lot of humor in these movies that I don't find myself enjoying. I think to an extent I'm a little disappointed, especially after last year's Naked Gun movie setting a very good example for how modern day parody movies should be handled, at least in my eyes. But the filmmakers at least tried here, even though at times it comes off as a little desperate in terms of its humor and fight to stay relevant, which I think should have been neglected in favor of writing better jokes more frequently. I'm giving Scary Movie 2026 3 stars. The performances are over the top and zany. The plot is barely there to begin with, and in its place are references for you to point at the screen and laugh at, which for me, most of the time, isn't really enough to be serviceable, but I can't deny that I was at least entertained by this. I think it's an odd placement for this movie to be released right now with the quick horror boom that's happened in the past few weeks with Obsession and Backrooms, as that seems to be creating a precedent for what the landscape may be turning into, and I can't fully say if movies like Scary Movie are going to fully survive in the long run. I've no idea if they'll even be able to make another movie after this. If this is the last one, I don't think this is the Wayans going out with a bang per se, but it's definitely endearing enough to keep you entertained, especially since it has a short runtime. The humor most certainly isn't going to be for everyone, and not because it's extremely offensive or anything. It's more so just because for most of the time it isn't all that funny, but even I can admit occasionally there is some pretty good bits scattered throughout, which makes for a good time at least. This movie is currently playing in theaters, and I fully believe the experience of seeing this movie should be seen with a crowd, as the energy and atmosphere can be pretty infectious, so this movie, like any movie in my opinion, should be seen on the big screen.